So yesterday I did my daily Kudus segment, and it seemed to be relatively well received. The premise was that the news on Mohamed Kudus changes on a daily basis. The news actually stays the same, but the club differs. It could be Chelsea, it could be Newcastle, it could be Arsenal, Tottenham, Manchester United, and it seems to be on sort of a rotating rotisserie, if you want. It just depends on which day, whichever club is the favourites to sign him. So I did my my daily Kudus breaking news roundup, unfortunately, in my attempts to try and do something slightly interesting. I accidentally used some copywritten music. So yeah, my video yesterday got put on the naughty step, basically. So I will revisit it, and we will get back to it. I've not forgotten. I just need to sort that bit and cut that little bit out and do things a little bit differently. There's no real Kudus news today because that's really involved in what I'm about to talk about, which is, as you know, that I've seen from the thumbnail and the title, that West Ham have gone and done a little bit of a backtrack and decided, from what I can gather, to fund the transfer window and scrap the sell before we buy policy. Now, ordinarily, I don't mind a backtrack. In fact, I don't. I always think if you're going to criticise someone, you have to allow some scope that they might take the criticism on board and say, okay, you know what, we'll go and do better. And sometimes, people just change their mind. And I think ordinarily that's absolutely fine. I just get a little bit worried when it's the people running the football club, and there is so much at stake here. So the story comes from Knees Up Mother Brown, and I have to hold my hands up here. I have not read the articles, so let me just say that right now. But there has been enough paraphrasing of it on social media that I think I got the general gist. And I'm also quite certain that if it was totally inaccurate, and Knees Up Mother Brown would have been all over everything, basically saying to people, take that down, that's not true, we didn't say that. And there's enough people who I trust who have seen it and gone through it that, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with what I'm about to say. So the premise goes, and I am paraphrasing here, that West Ham have decided to put a deadline on the sale of Mohamed Kudus, Edson Álvarez and Aguerd. And the decision has been, if they are not sold by a certain time, then the West Ham board will put their own money in to fund Graham Potter's transfer market activity. Well, quite bloody right too, and I don't know why they'd have taken so long. I argued relatively recently, and I did a video on this very channel saying the reason West Ham are not spending has everything to do with a lack of intent and desire rather than any legal reasons. I said there are numerous loopholes, there are numerous things that they could do. With 3 billionaires on the West Ham board, if there was desire, where there's a will, there's a way, right? And if there had been the desire, then West Ham could have put the money in. That coincided. It wasn't just about the Athletics article, which said actually we could have spent £95 million without being in trouble for PSR. But PSR was one of the reasons given. Well, the club say FFP, but they mean PSR. It probably is just more of a cash flow issue. But other teams find a way, and they find a way to inject funds. And I've always thought we'd been more than capable of doing so. We just didn't really want to. We were trying to do things on the cheap. Now, the really interesting, the whole part, everything that's come from that update from Knees Up Mother Brown is interesting. But as ever, the devil was in the detail. And part of it said that the West Ham board are going to decide upon this course of action because they believe the squad in its current state could be relegation candidates. Well, no shit, Sherlock. I mean, yeah. I don't know why that would be something that immediately becomes a light bulb moment on the 25th of June. Because that's been quite evident from last season. as I mentioned before, I got a lot of stick for suggesting that Kyle Macaulay's in a ridiculous situation because he was negotiating for players without any money, without any funds. As without going over old ground, and the perception was that I was throwing him under the bus. I wasn't. As I said at the time, it's a bit like sending a chef into the restaurant, asking him to cook you a lovely meal, but not giving him any ingredients. It was always on the club. I don't know. Kyle Macaulay, we don't know. None of us know. He could be good, bad, or indifferent at being a head of recruitment. But if you're going to get somebody in and pay a £1 million compensation and put them in charge of recruiting, you're probably going to need to give them some money for wages and stuff, you know? I don't mean his wages. I mean wages of players. Probably going to have to give them some money to give to agents, and you're certainly going to need to give them some money to give the selling clubs the transfer fees that they're going to want. The whole thing was preposterous. Graham Potter. I don't know if Graham Potter's going to be a good or a bad manager. And at this point, it doesn't actually matter. You just got to really deal with the evidence before your eyes. I guess, and what we've been told, which is Graham Potter is a project manager. What's a project manager? What he needs to build? He needs his players. Though one thing I think he has proven, that he can't really get very much out of the inherited players. That I think what we saw last season under Potter was about as good as it was going to get. Which means he needs his players. He needs his own. So to leave him at the start of the season, him and Macaulay, at the start of the transfer window, with no means to buy any players was absolutely ridiculous. And I don't know why it's taken this long. We don't really know who we've missed out on. And it's not a case of that player you think that West Ham might like. Maybe he hasn't signed for anyone yet. But we don't know. We don't know who they've identified. But even if they haven't signed, we've still allowed enough time for other clubs to be further down the route in negotiations. What this gives us now, more importantly, it gives Kyle Macaulay not so much a blank cheque, but it gives him some power to go into negotiations and know whether a player is affordable or not. I also think that the policy of... Actually, I think you could make the policy, if you really want to, you probably could make a policy of sell before you buy. But when you make it public, which is what the club have done, it puts you in a bad haggling position. So Arsenal can come along and say, we'll give you £50 million for Kudus. Oh, no, we want more than that. Well, take it. You might as well take it. You need to take it. You can't buy until you've got money, right? Here it is. Here's your £50 million. Start your transfer window off. And I think, even if that had been the policy, you don't have to say that. So I think West Ham have been put at a disadvantage by the policy itself and by the declaration of the policy. And I guess, you know, I say we, I'm not going to speak for you. I guess they should be happy that they've realised the error of their ways and they're going to put the money in. But I don't know. I don't know when the deadline is. If Aguerd, if Mohamed Kudus and Edson Álvarez have not been sold. I mean, Edson Álvarez is a funny one because he couldn't have been sold. He's at the Gold Cup. He's playing for Mexico. So he really couldn't have been sold anyway. He can't go and have negotiations. The Kudus one is dragging. It's dragging so much. We got our own little special feature on this channel about Mohamed Kudus. Aguerd, it's slightly different. Understandably, we covered this in the 60 seconds yesterday. The club are not going to take a derisory offer for him. And this is right, isn't it? This now empowers you. Because, let's be fair, be it Kretinsky, Tripp Smith, David Sullivan, no one's going down the food bank if they put a bit of money into West Ham, right? So if we know the rules permit them to do it, which clearly they do, because if we weren't allowed to do it, they wouldn't be saying, oh, hold on a second, we will put some in if we don't get the funds. I understand that. So they can afford to do it. And I just don't, I really don't realise, I don't understand what the hold-up, what the reasoning for the hold-up was, why it became evident now. And it just empowers you to think, okay, we've got that money, we're going to put it in. And if someone comes in and offers whatever, let's say they rate Aguerd at 23 million, whatever the case may be, and someone comes in with 15, they can just say no. Because they've insulated themselves from that. They can say no to Arsenal at 50 million for Mohamed Kudus because they can say we want 65 million and they can mean it. And they can do that all the way along. And if it comes to a point where they have to balance the books, they'll have to balance the books. But I will leave this with you now, which is what I think is the really interesting part about this. It's the stance that the club have taken with Aguerd, which is Aguerd wants to leave. The club didn't want him to leave. Graham Potter wanted him to play on the left side of a back three. And it's a case of, well, if we don't get the money we want, you're coming back for pre-season training, mate, because you're contracted to West Ham. That is the right attitude. That's exactly what you should be doing. Exactly what you should be doing. And I think now we can say that with some authority. The sort of authority and the sort of insulation that having 3 billionaires on the board should afford you. That should give you that. We're not skin toss. We're not. We're all right. We're good. We're good. We'd like to be sustainable. But if push comes to shove, we got a couple of people that are worth 1.5 billion and we got another bloke in Kretinsky who's worth 13 billion. We're all right. We're all right. We can find the 95 million. Don't worry about that. And it gives you the sort of negotiating power that not only enables you to buy players, but enables you to sell them at the right rate and sell them at the price that you want to sell them for and not have your pants pulled down. But I think more importantly, sorry, see that Mozzie? I don't know if the camera caught him. He's looking at me. Well, I presume he's looking at me. He's thinking there's a bit of tasty lunch there. Anyway, just finally, it does allow you, with Mohamed Kudus, who's still on a long-term contract. And I think Mohamed Kudus is quite within his rights to reject the move to Saudi, which is where West Ham would like to pack him off to. Go to Saudi Arabia, because we'll get loads of money then. He's quite within his rights, and I think it's commendable that Kudus would say, no, I want to stay in the UK, or I want to go to a club in Europe that's in the Champions League, because that is my footballing choice. Contractually, you can't force me to go to Saudi, and he's quite right, and I would defend him on that. I really would. But the reverse is also true, which is if we find ourselves in a position, because we're going to fund ourselves, we don't have to sell Mohamed Kudus, that if the correct offer comes in, he can go. But if our ceiling is 65 million and people are coming in with 50 million, it just enables us to turn around to, be it Arsenal, Tottenham, Newcastle or anyone else, and say, you know what, we're not accepting that. We're going to keep him, and he'll stay here next season. Come back in January if you want to. But Mohamed Kudus is going to stay as a squad player at West Ham. We're going to continue to play him. And you know what? It's not going to affect us bringing in any of the other players that Graham Potter needs.